what this is all about, is your right to freedom of speech.
What made America great is an independent, vigorous press.
If a jerk burns a flag, America is not threatened.
Political speech is the heart of the First Amendment.
For expressing their religious beliefs.
Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
Welcome to Speaking Freely, a weekly conversation about free expression in America. I'm Ken Paulson. Today we're joined by a man whose inventive comedy with the Smothers Brothers made us laugh and made us think. We're delighted to welcome Tom Smothers. Great to have you here.
Hi, Ken.
I got a kick out of reading your bio indicating that you were once a big fan of George Gobel.
I saw George Gobel when I was 15 years old on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I said, God, look at that, is pretty good. I'd like to do that. I remember his first routine I saw was he lost his bowling ball. And he explained it to the police. He reported stolen or lost, and they said, describe it. He said, well, it's round and it's black with 3 holes in it. They said, well, the holes on the top or the bottom? He goes, well, it just went on and on without any real jokes. And I said, I'd like to do that. And before I knew I wanted to be a professional, I thought he was a monologist. And that's what I said. He stands up and gives things. So he was my first impression, and Burl Ives was my first musical import, where it struck me as something kind of neat. And between the two of them, and George Gobel, played a guitar. He had a great big guitar. Originally, they took his guitar away. Not many people know that, but it was pretty good.
Now, you and your brother Dick essentially started as a folk singing duo.
We started in high school as singing pop music. The first song we sang was Shaboom, and we were singing something Smith and the Redheads, some songs, and then the Kingston Trio and the Weavers came and said, oh man, that's really good stuff. We started singing folk music, and it had a story. And we started, I started listening to everybody, Judy Collins and all these people who were singing songs. I just picked them up and played with them a little bit, and then we became known as satirists.
What year did the television show go on the air?
The Comedy Hour went on in 1966, 67. So 67, 68, 69, 2.5 seasons. The first season, interesting. Had a few problems here, but I said I would like to have a show that at least has something that makes you think. And Mason Williams was my kind of mentor. I mentored him, but he was my conscience in a sense. That we'd look at sketches and they were vacuous, and we'd try to put something into it that would translate into another, a higher, more intelligent, not just a Red Skelton show, which I liked, but with a little thought in it.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the relationship of a censor to a television show?
They called them program practices and standards, which were set up to cut out naughty words and things like that. They watched it, but when we started getting into reflecting what was happening in Vietnam and stuff, and we throw these pins, they didn't know how to handle that because it didn't come to their purveyance of what this was done. War is bad for children and other living things, and they said, well, this is a communist front organization or something like that. They didn't know. So this is 30 years ago. It's my take on it now in time. When I listen to today's free speech, First Amendment being thrown around like an old rag and waved as a banner to allow anything to be said without any content. It's being abused absolutely in my mind. When you talk about M&Ms, and even so we say are the rock groups, and I see Jack Valenti get up and defend the Sony for their violent television games and gratuitous sex and violence, and they say free speech, free speech. I said, what is this about? I mean, we're thrown off for the real reason of free speech, questioning the government, and Jack Valenti didn't say a word. In fact, we couldn't even get an attorney to defend us. We had to go to the ACLU, and the first time I came in contact with them, I think they're going a little wacko myself on the other side. But there they were for us, and to take our case to court. And nowadays, I mean, every attorney in the world would love to have that case. It's so litigious now, and everybody's looking to make a buck on these issues. But back then, it was we kind of were on our own.
I think a lot of people would be amazed at some of the instances you faced in putting that show together, and some of the battles And I guess words would just, like mind-blowing, would be something that would unsettle the censors at the time.
Well, Pete Seeger, we had him on, and because we were folk musicians, we respected that. I never had any idea that until just prior to bringing him on the show that it was a blacklisted, because I was not politically aware at that time.
There were 17 or 18 years that Pete Seeger appeared nowhere because they believed he was a communist and couldn't appear on network television. Did you break that logjam? Did you just simply invite him?
Yeah, invited him.
Did you have to go to someone at CBS?
I had creative control, see.
I see, I see.
So I had whoever I wanted on, and I asked my guests, I said, what would you like to sing? He said, I'd like to sing Waist Deep in the Big Money. I said, fine, go ahead. And he sang the song, the program practice said, you can't do that.
Now that's a song that it involves soldiers marching into a river, and the fool says, march on. And,
it was supposed in 1942, a training, but it was actually a parallel to the Vietnam War, the waist deep, deeper, deeper, deeper into it. And he wrote the song, and they took it off. I made a big stink about it. Got a lot of attention in the press. And we invited him back again, and said, what would you like to sing? Mr. Seeger said, Waist Deep, and I said, be my guest. And he sang it again. This time they left it on because things were changing, the viewpoint. We reflected pretty much the counterculture at that time, and everybody on the show was basically 30 or under. Mason Williams was a huge moral, ethical support for me. And so that's, but my concern now about First Amendment is this abuse of it. I don't know if I remember being invited to a seconding the first. And I said, I don't know about that. Because I see that guy from, what's his, shock jock, Howard Stern. First Amendment, it's the most innocuous. I mean, people have said, don't you wish you had your television show now, Tommy Smothers? What you could say, anything you want, look at what's going on. I said, well, that's not exactly true, is it? There's an illusion of narcissistic crotch focus, language, sexuality, but not much political satire or dissent in prime time. It's all in the late, you have Dennis Miller and you have Bill Maher and you have Saturday Night Live and some of these programs, but they're all on the fringes. There's nothing in prime time. I mean, I think we're the last show that said, hey, we think the American policy is bad in Central America or bad in Southeast Asia. Or we don't agree with that, but we did it in an interesting way. Right. But there's no political satire being done in prime time. There's taboo subject matters that were never discussed, that the program practices were set up to stop from happening back in the early times of broadcasting.
Did you watch the Saturday Night Live series of mock debates, the Gore and Bush?
Yeah, that was wonderful.
That was pretty close to the spirit of what you're talking about.
Yes.
Well, let me challenge you a little bit about your sense that the First Amendment may be misapplied today. When you think about a skit on your show called Tea with Goldie, not truly a political message, obviously hinting at the joy of drugs.
Yeah.
You know, that you wouldn't have wanted to be censored for that, although it really was not an overt attack on the government.
No.
Was that misapplying the First Amendment to protect jokes about illicit use of drugs?
Yeah, well, you got me there. Isn't that pretty interesting? It might be.
You had some extraordinarily powerful moments on the television show that never appeared, and I'm specifically talking about Harry Belafonte being on, singing a song, "Don't Stop the Carnival."
With new words to it.
With new words and then interesting set. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we had him on as the last season of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, and each year got a little more testy, a little, the disagreements got heavier, and I became more politicized. Became an advocate more than I should have been in hindsight. But we had Belafonte on, and they wrote a nice piece with the collection of his calypso songs with the backdrop of the National Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968, which was an incredible violent thing. We had all these things happening with him singing these songs in a satirical way, and they said, "Tom, we told you you can't have any violence on the television." And so they took it off and put in an ad for paid commercial for Richard Nixon's run for the White House, which of course I wasn't a very tolerant guy. I was pretty well, I had a pretty good temper, and I would have fits all the time. They seemed to be effective.
Were there early signs in that show that you were going to have rough going, or did it evolve? Did you get more aggressive as time went on?
I got more aggressive as the war escalated, and we saw the Kent State, and we saw the protests taking place. We in turn just were reflecting that we weren't watching it, and it wasn't premeditated, or it was pretty spontaneous reflection. We came back in 1988 and did some shows for CBS. And about the sixth show into these 1-hour specials, one of the CBS guys said, kind of pick it up a little bit, a little more controversial, a little edgy, come on, a little more edgy. And so I said, okay. And Dick was doing an introduction, and I came out in a bunny suit with just my face showing with these big ears and a pink bunny suit. He says, what are you doing? I says, I'm protesting our policies in Central America. So wearing a bunny suit doesn't make any sense. I said, so either does our policy in Central America. He says, well, that looks stupid. The bunny says, so is our policy. He said, well, get out of that bunny suit. We ought to get out of Central America. So big laughs, it's very funny. Then that was the dress rehearsal. The guy says, well, now, you got to say at the end there, but it's up to our elected officials to get us out of this. So I said, okay. Then at that, it was even funnier. Like they're going to do that.
That's right.
So that kind of entertainment still is not seen in where most people are watching.
Now, you aggravated at least 2 presidents, LBJ and Richard Nixon. Maybe,
I love that.
Maybe more. And clearly there was a sense that you had power. Do you feel like you influenced policy, that you influenced people, that you, in some modest way, helped change the world? I
think it's a modest way somewhere along the line. As far as to see that what other power it was, obviously it was influencing, because we were thrown off the air. So people said, "God, you were ahead of your time." I said, "Well, if we were ahead of our time, no one would have paid attention to us. We were right on time. That's when you get." That was a very powerful move to take us off the air at that time, fire. So it's kind of nice. I run into people. We get a lot of residual respect from people in their 40s and 50s who said, "Oh, you're a breath of fresh air for us. We watched you," and that's a nice feeling. At the time we were doing it, of course, I had no idea. I'd have kept better records. I'd have kept a journal, because I'm asked more about this than anything. I kept getting these interviews about John Lennon, or an interview about, we want to do a thing on VH1 on The Who, and on Steve Martin, and on Mama Cass, and they come to me, they said, what am I, a suppository of information? I said, geez, that sounds exactly like George W. So I get that RT, I'm a suppository? No, I'm a repository of
You mentioned John Lennon. You were there at the bed-in, and you were part of.
I was playing the guitar, and
Peace a chance.
And he corrected me. You know.
You have to tell. Very few people were sitting there, and we need to hear about that.
It was in Montreal, I think it was. And the bed-in for Peace. It was 1969, 1970.
1969, yeah.
And I was invited to show up, and Yoko Ono, and they were in bed, and they had laying there, and Timothy Leary, a bunch of kind of radical people were there, and we're singing a song, Tom. Here's another guitar. And it started playing, all we are saying, give peace a chance. And he started singing. And I was playing in D, or some simple chord, so I went up to the next chorded version, was playing it in another version, put a little diminished passing chord. He said, oh, stop. He says, play it exactly like I'm playing it. Don't play that. I said, I thought I was showing him all my good stuff. He says, you just repeat exactly, double the guitar. That's what I want. I said, okay. So.
And you sang on that, and you're on the video, and
yeah.
I gather you're not getting royalties from that performance.
No, it doesn't matter, does it?
Did that surprise you that a song that was as overtly political, sung by a Beatle or not, would become such a best-selling record and really an anthem?
It was a beautiful song, wasn't it? Just so simple.
Did it feel that way in the room?
I kind of had a feeling, yeah. I kind of had a feeling there was going to be that kind of song.
One of the overriding themes of this show is that artists often use their work to make a statement, to make a difference. And one of the remarkable things about your program was the number of people you had on who did precisely that. And Joan Baez once came on and wanted to dedicate a song to her husband, which for most people would seem like a rather innocuous thing to do, but that unsettled the censors as well.
Well, she dedicated, Harris was his name, and I dedicated to my husband who resisted the draft above board and is going to prison for it. And they cut out the reason. I'm dedicating this to my husband who's going to prison. And it was very upsetting. But that's when the pressure was coming on. That was 1969. It's hard for people to remember that aren't old enough to remember. It was the most divisive time that I recall, maybe since the Civil War, as far as differences of opinion. It was, you were either a long hair, short hair, a hawk or a dove. You love it or leave it. There was no room at all for any kind of equivocation in this. And Joan Baez, oh my goodness, she's done so many good things. And I only had a television show with my brother at the time, reflected a thing. We never have put out the effort most of the people that we were reflecting out there actually did. I mean, to do the marches and stuff the envelopes and do all the real things. But Joan was one of them, and Seeger was one of them, and a lot of people. We had the great song, the Buffalo Springfield, There's Something Happening, you know. Great songs. There's great stuff, great music then, too.
You had some momentous moments.
But I am concerned, and it does upset me, about the same way the Second Amendment is expanded itself to the point to care, that the First Amendment is I'm not hearing anything being said.
That can offend you, but what's the alternative? To say that these are words that can't be used?
Well, I don't think that we should be trotting out the First Amendment when nothing's being said.
But help me with this, because I've had this conversation with a number of people who are...
Steve Allen, too, I probably was very adamant about this.
Right, Steve Allen was extraordinarily adamant about how the culture had gone to seed.
And he's bright. He's got all the marbles going, too.
But how do we guard against a sort of generational impulse, and I have it too, to think that what we did was not all that shocking and not that appalling, and what they're doing today is shocking and appalling. Chuck D of Public Enemy, the rapper, was in that chair last week, and he said, my rap with Public Enemy was not dangerous, but today's stuff I need to protect my children against. And I'm sure there were people who viewed you as Public Enemy #1 in '68 and '69. Well, there's a classic quote from a woman in the Daily News saying that if this were, she hates the Smothers Brothers, if this were a totalitarian country, you'd be taken out and shot.
I thought I would have been too in any other country, yeah.
And it was a close call in this country too. How do we protect against that? How do you, I mean, clearly you have a lot of passion.
Well, maybe it's already done. It's been done. We are now sitting here intellectualizing and philosophizing about the First Amendment, and we're dealing with that rights of the M&Ms and Tommy Smothers and the arts going over the edge, while this country is about what it's about. And we're sitting here in this little glass room discussing the rights of bad speech and its protection, the right for Nazis to march in so-and-so, and ACL protecting every little piss-ass piece of crap that comes up. And here,
could you be a little more candid?
Well, and then we have this stuff going. The First Amendment was the right to not to abridge freedom of speech by the government, to be able to criticize. That was a concept. We don't hear any criticism.
If I could talk one final chapter on the television show, because I think a lot of people miss the direct correlation between the First Amendment and government. And in the case of your being fired from CBS, I mean, it's a remarkable story in that the show is profitable, the ratings are good, and suddenly we have a new president, Richard Nixon, and within 6 weeks, you're off the air. And the controversy builds around a show to be broadcast on Easter. one of those, the most frequently cited reason for CBS objecting was a sermonette to be done by David Steinberg. But less often reported is that you took the opportunity in this show to make fun of a senator.
Pastore?
Yes, who was holding hearings on the content of television. And oddly enough, just weeks before your firing, Frank Stanton at CBS took a very strong stand and said to Senator Pastore, we're not going to submit our programming to this industry organization to have them do pre-screening. That was a proposal. That the theme always is, the government doesn't want to censor you, so we don't want to have to censor you, so please censor yourself. And CBS took a very strong First Amendment position. And then, like that, you were gone.
Well, also took a position and turned around and had all of our shows pre-screened for every single affiliate. But we got some of these tapes, of Nixon tapes, and it was very powerful. The government, it's different. It's a different dynamic now, media versus government. It's reversed. But then it was, when Nixon said, I want those guys off, they're off. Now, if Humphrey would have been elected, we would have been on. So those are just the way things happen.
And you think Richard Nixon had something to do with you?
Oh, absolutely.
How would that message come? A memo from the White House?
No, they wouldn't send you a memo. But okay, William Paley, Dr. Stanton, and Mr. Annenberg, who owned the TV Guide, scathing thing on the Smothers Brothers. I mean, this was not just all of a sudden they just kind of sinked in. It was an organized thing. They both wanted the ambassador to the Court of St. James, and I think Dr. Annenberg got it, but William Paley wanted it also. The Smothers Brothers are small fish. I mean, don't mean anything in that big picture, and that's true. And this country always allows dissent if it's not too dissentful. If it's not too influenced too much, that's our token, our allowance that we have freedom. There's a lot of freedom in this country, but in the name of the United States, we're doing such damage around, and then it's got to be said. Now, I would say, what would you do if I had a show now? I said, oh, man, mostly it would be cash. People come and give them cash, and I'd give them kickbacks, and was doing the thing. It'd be that, or it would be a business, a lot of satire in business, how we export this and who controls what. And it seems it's hopeless, and it's just getting so, people out there, they're going, well, what can we do? I mean, you see these last elections, and you see the money both parties bringing in, and you're thinking, well, and that's the First Amendment? Excuse me, money is the First Amendment? Freedom of speech? It would be if everybody had the equal amount of money to spend on these elections, but until that is the case, it's certainly the Supreme Court saying that money is a free expression. Now, if I was really clever, I could come up with a punchline here, but I'm not.
Does any of this material make its way into your current act?
Not very much, unless I get someone to write it. The reason our show was, the old show, we had writers writing all the time, and we had a staff of 24 writers and working on sketches, working on concepts.
And boy, did you have writers. I mean, you had legendary people working for you, and who in turn shaped the face of comedy for at least another decade, maybe two. Certainly Steve Martin was a major player. Who else wrote for you?
Rob Reiner. Oh, he was a radical, too. He was one of these, come on, Tom, let's go. Let's get passionate here. So, and it's funny, Steve Martin is not a social political animal. I guess they watched me and they said, no, I don't want to do that. And I watched Bill Martin. I said, oh, Bill, relax here. Just be observational.
It's clear that you continue to feel very strongly about issues, and having a social conscience is very much a part of who you are. We are also, though, looking at a generation that's less politically connected, less politically passionate, a younger generation coming up. What are your hopes for that generation?
Oh, man. People out there who watch this show, I mean, they're very bright. And I keep thinking there's going to be a presidential candidate or some party thing that's going to step in. I think there's a huge amount in this country of innate sense of fairness, sense of fair play. We love the underdogs. It's the nature of our society, where we revolutionary things. And someone's going to tap that because it's sitting there waiting. And sometimes Perot tapped it for a second, didn't have all the things, and Nader taps a little bit, didn't have the thing, but someone will tap this, and it's going to be an incredible, I mean, I'm hoping for this, knock on wood, that it becomes fair and true and honest and equitable. And there are people in this country, and I think a majority of people feel that way. And they haven't been connected to the right nozzle of fire hydrant of truth.
Fire hydrant of truth.
Pathetic, wasn't it?
I've always enjoyed your comedy. Today, I deeply appreciate your candor. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Tommy Smothers. Our guest has been Tom Smothers. I'm Ken Paulson, back next week with another conversation about free expression, the arts in America. I hope you can join us then for Speaking Freely.